5, we're back on the record. I wanted to advise the parties that earlier today I received information from the clerk of court that she had received an email that the person sending the email had found a post on Justice for Darrell on Reddit, so it's a subreddit. I'm not familiar with how Reddit works, but and that the thread on the Justice for Darrell Reddit site was claiming to be a member of the jury pool. And I am going to provide the parties with the information that I was given this morning. It's a color copy of the attachment and the email that was sent. The email was received by the clerk of court at 9:10 a.m. Then my clerk received a notification at 9:30 a.m. that the clerk of court wanted to speak with me. You may recall this morning I stepped off the bench for a little bit of time. I read through the information that was provided to me, which was an email, and then the attachment, which is a color print off. Looks like the person took a screenshot, and that the anonymous post claimed to be a member of the jury on the case, and here are my thoughts on the trial and on this subreddit. And apparently, again, it's a subreddit called Justice for Darrell. All those, Justice, the number 4, and Darrell, all, no spaces. I then had contact with Captain Dussault, advised him that this should be investigated, and basically turned over the matter to law enforcement for a full investigation. At this point, or at that point, I made a determination based upon my review of the information that I would not stop what was happening in terms of the trial with the instructions to the jury and ultimately the closing arguments, and then turning the case over to the jury for deliberations. And of course, I am concerned about the integrity of these proceedings, and I will take whatever action that I deem appropriate once a full investigation is done. But at this point, there is no, I would say, credible information that this is in fact a member of the jury. But I will leave that for law enforcement to determine, and if need be, at the conclusion of the case, when the jury reaches a verdict, I certainly will consider whether any questioning of the jurors at that point is warranted. So that's the information I wanted to provide. Again, copies of this information will be provided to the parties, and there is a full investigation underway by the Sheriff's Department. I have no further information about it at this time. I will not be the judge that will further be reviewing it in terms of any requests related to that investigation. I will simply be handling whether any requests as it relates to this case in particular. And I hope we have the copies for the parties. And we'll provide those. Go ahead.
I'm making sure you was
Go ahead.
first. What is this?
All I can tell you, sir, is that there is apparently on the internet, on a site, or maybe it's an application, I'm not entirely sure, called Reddit. There's a subreddit that is entitled Justice for Darrell, and it was on that subreddit that someone wrote an anonymous post claiming to be one of the jurors. That, of course, would be a violation of the rules that I set up for the jurors, which is why I turned over the information to law enforcement so they could make a full and complete investigation.
For the record, I accept for value in return for value these documents. I'm confused.
At this point, sir, I'm providing the information. I trust that the parties will review it, and if a party believes that any request needs to be made of this court, then an appropriate request will be made. But at this point, I'm just advising the parties of the information that I have. And I will add this, I will, of course, it's important that the results of any investigation be turned over to the parties. I don't know how long that will take, but that is also my direction. That was really the only direction I gave to law enforcement, is that the results of the investigation that be turned over to the parties.
Was this? Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Was this just found out about this morning?
Yes, the email that was sent to the clerk of court was received at 9:10 a.m. And then that email and the attachment, I'm aware of a second, I will say I'm aware of a second email that was sent to our clerk of court at 10:02 a.m. And I think when we stepped off the bench following the case being given to the jury, I was advised that other emails had been received throughout the court system, and I simply said, obviously that information needs to go to law enforcement. I haven't seen it, haven't reviewed it, but any person who works in the clerk of court's office who has received an email, that email about this topic will be forwarded to the sheriff's department. Their forensic unit is handling the investigation, to my understanding. Attorney Upper, did you have a question or something to state?
Yes, Your Honor, I just wanted to state for the record that I have also received similar emails at my office this afternoon. They were sent not to me directly, but to the district attorney's office website. And I only wanted to point out that in viewing the content of the posting, well, first of all the emails refer to the exact same posting and the language is the exact same in all the postings. In viewing the content of the posting, we question the veracity of the posting because it refers to things that, quite frankly, are not true. And also, upon reviewing it, Your Honor, we came to the conclusion that it does not exhibit any material prejudice against Darrell Brooks that may affect the veracity of any verdict that may be returned in this case. The posting is largely critical of the court and to some extent the prosecution, but the nature of the posting is actually in support of Mr. Brooks. That's why it's under a subreddit called Justice for Darrell. And I don't believe there's any reasonable reading of this post that would lead someone to believe that it suggests the juror harbors substantial or material prejudice against the defendant.
Thank you, I appreciate the additional record.
Can I say something, Your Honor?
Go ahead.
Just briefly skimming through it, I do want to state for the record that I have no involvement with this. I'm really like shocked like this even came to light. I will say just by skimming through it, these are definitely things that have been talked about in the court. So common sense would say that this came from someone that has either been in the court to hear what goes on in the court or a jury member. This is no other way.
Well, actually, the proceedings are live streamed worldwide, Your Honor, available on YouTube worldwide, so I don't agree with that assessment.
Well, I mean, it's pretty obvious that this would come from somebody who's actually, I think it's pretty clear.
Well, I'm leaving it in the hands of law enforcement to do a full and complete investigation. Again, I take the integrity of this process incredibly seriously, and if there were to be a juror who violated the rules, I would take that very seriously, and I will not hesitate to take any action that I deem appropriate. At this time, it is simply being investigated. This was an anonymous post, and if either party believes any further action needs to take place as it relates to this particular jury, then I trust they'll file the appropriate request with the court. So with that,